Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Jobin, and you are listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. This podcast is dedicated to helping family caregivers in Ontario. Through expert tips and resources, you will gain knowledge and validation for the ups and downs that come with caregiving. More importantly, you'll learn that you're not alone. It's so important to take this time for yourself. We're glad you're here. Today, we are joined by two guests, Helen Ries and Laura Nicholls. Helen is a caregiver and co-founder of the Sibling Collaborative. The Sibling Collaborative is a national organization for adults who are caring for their siblings with developmental disabilities. Helen is also a member of the Ontario Caregiver Organization's Developmental Disability Family Caregiver Working Group. Laura is a sibling caregiver for her younger brother. Helen and Laura, thank you so much to both of you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Michelle.
It'll be really great to have this conversation with you. And, we're going to dive into, I find this season, we're talking about a lot of different aspects of caregiving that are not always the first things people think about when it comes to caregiving. So I think that when we're talking about sibling caregivers, that's definitely, something I think that there needs to be a broader conversation about. And we wanted to create a space where Ontario caregivers could connect and share. And hopefully through our conversation today, we can all gain a little more insight into the special role and responsibility of a caregiver, whatever category that falls under, and as well give caregivers resources for help. So Helen, I wanted to start out with you. You became a caregiver for your brother after your parents passed away. Can you tell us what it was like when you first took on this caregiving role for your sibling?
So my dad passed away first, and then my mom passed away a couple of years later. And I'm sure it goes without saying that becoming my brother's primary carer was an overwhelming, if not traumatic experience. It wasn't, neither of their deaths were expected. And until that moment, being my brother's carer always seemed like a faraway, abstract concept. And even though my parents were aging, they were still in great shape. And it was just something I never really had on the front burner. So it was very scary and worrisome. I wasn't really sure how I was going to manage. And I'm still asking myself that today.
How did your sibling dynamic change when that happened?
So I guess my brother and I always had a kind of fairly typical big sister, younger brother dynamic. I was always teasing and, we always exchanged insults, and there was kind of like just a casual kind of relationship. And of course, when my mom passed away and both of us realized that I was going to be the one who was going to be holding most of the cards and around decision making. And my brother wasn't very happy about that. So there was quite a lot of tension. My brother, I wanted to make sure I included him in decision making, but before my dad passed away, my dad had told him, "You're the captain now." And I don't know if my father realized what he unleashed when he told my brother that, but it actually added to the complexity of our power dynamic, because I was trying to explain to him there is no captain, but actually, in fact, as the typical sibling, I was the captain, for lack of a better word. So our power dynamic changed. There was a lot of tension. Over time, it's become better in that I always say, just because you grow up with a person with a disability doesn't mean that you understand disability. And only as I got deeper and deeper into my role did I understand Paul's equity in the relationship and how to support him in making decisions and how to create a more inclusive space for him. So we're a little more even keeled now, but we have our moments, that's for sure.
Is there something you can tell us about what the unique barriers and challenges that are specific to sibling caregivers and what they face. And I think you maybe kind of highlighted some of that right now, but, and how you eventually coped with those issues.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the biggest challenges is the assumption that as the brother or sister of a person with a developmental disability, it's your birthright to be the caregiver. So it is not our birthright. And it's something that we do out of love and family, concern for family. And it's interesting that that's sort of like my perceived assumption of policymakers, decision makers, that it is our birthright, and yet there is nothing available for us in terms of support. So, there's this demographic shift happening where parents like Laura's family and my family, the parents are passing away, and we are our brothers and sisters are living longer, and so now there are many sibling carers or people anticipating being carers, and again, that assumption that we're just going to take on that role, and yet there being no resources for us. When my mom passed away, I went to the developmental services office, and they're in charge of support for our brothers and sisters. And I said, so what now? And the response to me was, just do what your mom did. I don't know what they meant by that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And eventually I actually did have to follow in my mom's footsteps. I had to leave my full-time career and all the effort I'd made to get to that place, and work from home and try and take care of my brother. So I guess the barriers are that assumption that we're not taken into consideration around supports and services, and also that brothers and sisters of people with developmental disabilities are not taken into consideration, or they're overlooked as part of the family care system. And, I think parents like mine, they tried really hard to keep me out of it, to block me out of that future care conversation. And don't worry, live your own life. We'll make sure everything's in place. And I'm not the only one where that's happened. And by blocking us out, really all that does is lead to a traumatic reentry when we actually do have to step in and take care, and that, many of those abstract notions of future planning are actually not there.
And this is why it's so great that we're having this conversation, because like you said, I think there's a growing number of people that find themselves being sibling caregivers. And again, it's just sort of, I've found as with many of the conversations I've had, especially this season, that there just seems to be like a box. And most people think of caregivers as, maybe a person in midlife taking care of an aging parent. And there's so many situations that fit in outside of that. May I just comment on that? So what's really interesting about that dynamic is, let's say you're taking care of an aging parent, there's a time limitation on that. So there's a period of time that you're going to be a caregiver. For me and Laura and other siblings like us, there is no time limit. Mm. So our caregiving journey starts when our parents pass away and goes until our brother or sister or we pass away. And that's a very, very long journey. I met a wonderful woman at the beginning of my sibling caregiving experience who was 75, and she'd been looking after her sister for 25 years. Her sister eventually passed away at 71. That is like a significant chunk of your life dedicated to care. And just to remind you of what we were talking about earlier, you're dedicating a significant amount of your life to care, unplanned, unsupported, and also uncompensated. So Laura and I and other siblings like us receive no compensation from our families, or unless they've noted that, or from the government,
for the work that we do with our brothers and sisters at home.
So are there resources financially available that would have been available to your parents that are not available to you because you're the sibling?
No, there's the caregiver tax credit, which we can claim. And my parents could claim, I believe my parents could claim that, and I claim that now. But, this was my brother was my parents' child. This is not my child. And it's a very different kind of situation. So like I said, I gave up my career to care, and a caregiver's tax credit does not support the giving up of the career in my peak, might I note, in my peak income earning years too.
And I think this leads quite directly into my next question, because caring for a sibling while also trying to manage your own life and live your own life can be incredibly difficult. So have you felt now that you've found a balance? And if yes, what has helped you do that? And if no, how do you cope with that challenge?
So the answer is no. I haven't found that balance. Laura and I do talk about this privately when we have a chance, but our brothers, we begin our caregiving journey when they're older. And so there are multiple complexities around an aging person with a developmental disability that my parents might not have had to deal with. And it's a continually moving target. So my brother, Paul, is a person with Down syndrome, and people with Down syndrome age hard, like actually people with other developmental disabilities too. So we're continually meeting new challenges. COVID also threw in a whole other range of challenges. And so, no, I haven't really found a balance. I work really hard at trying to cobble together some kind of balance, ensuring that I'm exercising, visiting friends, and finding joy in my own life. But I have to work very, very, very hard to make sure that happens for me.
If you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed in your caregiving journey, you're not alone. The Ontario Caregiver Organization collaborates with caregivers, healthcare providers, and other organizations to provide support and resources to caregivers across the province, because caregivers need support too. By providing one point of access to information, caregivers can get everything they need to be successful in their role. Our goal is to decrease caregiver burnout and improve the caregiving experience. Learn more about us at ontariocaregiver.ca. I'm going to bring Laura in soon because I want to hear about her stories, and there's some questions that I'd like to ask both of you. But before we do that, I wanted to talk about the Sibling Collaborative, which is something that you've created, Helen, because you obviously felt that there was the need there for it. So let's talk about it. What motivated you to start the Sibling Collaborative?
So I think I mentioned that conversation where I was in the developmental service office, and the woman said to me, just do what your mother did. And I walked out of there and thought, this can't be. It can't be that there's no one out there who can have a conversation with me about what I'm facing. And so it was from there that I met Becky Rossi and Dr. Yona Lunsky, and we launched a survey just to find out what was going out on. We were curious, so we just launched a survey on social media. And I call the Sibling Collaborative a happy accident, because it was when we got the results back, Dr. Lunsky, who is the director of the Israeli Neurodevelopment Center at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, helped us analyze the data. And we produced an article, which meant we got a little bit of funding. And so that it was just sort of like an accidental sequence of activities, but really motivated by that need to find out, like, am I the only person in the world that's going through this experience? And we were lucky to be able to attract some funding, and people were interested in what we had to do and what we what we were putting together. And it's grown. And I actually have exciting news too, in that the Sibling Collaborative has always sort of operated as a small grassroots organization, jumping from small grant to small grant and trying to stay alive. And very recently, we have transitioned to becoming part of the new Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. And yes, this is very, very exciting news for us. CCCE has a most wonderful executive director who's very keen on sibling issues, and recognizes that siblings are a really important part of this this family ecosystem around caregiving. So now we have a whole different type of wind under our sails, and are able to do more work and better work, and really keep the voice of siblings alive in the caregiving space. So that's how we started, and this is the exciting news of where we are now.
That is very exciting, and congratulations on that. And was that, the main goal and focus of the Sibling Collaborative? Was it really to give sibling caregivers a voice, bring the issues that they encounter on a daily basis to the surface? Or can you elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, so of course that was to raise awareness. It was certainly part of our intention, but also we wanted to find out, what do siblings like Laura and I need? So we try to connect siblings with each other, because sharing our stories is a really great way of finding new ideas for ourselves, finding new resources. We also create a lot of resources. We create guidebooks, and right now we are putting together some e-learning around finances, how siblings can steward the long-term financial well-being of their brothers and sisters. And then, of course, through Dr. Lunsky, our connection to the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, we do a lot of work around supporting our mental health, so that we can stay strong and resilient and be there for our brothers and sisters over the long term. So those are the areas where we're focusing.
What do you think that needs to happen for sibling caregivers to feel more supported?
We need to be recognized by service providing organizations, so organizations that serve our brothers and sisters with disabilities. We also need policymakers at the provincial and federal levels to recognize and address our journeys and what we're doing in order to relieve the system. And we need more resources, like whether that's a mental health support, different ways that we can, over the long term, be compensated for our role, and finding ways for us to connect with each other so that we can share our experiences and our stories.
You mentioned CAMH, and the Sibling Collaborative and CAMH recently did this joint report on the experiences of siblings of people with IDD during the COVID-19 pandemic, because that has been a whole new ballgame for all of us over the last couple of years, but even more so when you're a caregiver. Tell us about this report and what it uncovered.
Sure. So we did a study at 2 periods of time. We wanted to compare at the beginning of the pandemic and then 6 months later, how siblings were experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic. And what we found is that about 80% of siblings were actually supporting their brothers or sisters during the pandemic in some way, and that 95% of them were really concerned about the health and well-being of their brothers and sisters. They were worried about the disruption in their brothers and sisters' routine, which is certainly something that I experienced here in our home. The inability for our siblings with disabilities to visit with family, whether it was like direct family or extended family and their friends. And then they worried a lot about their siblings' capacity to understand physical distancing, and so therefore to stay safe. There were a lot of emotions that brothers and sisters were feeling. what rose to the surface was a lot of worry about the future. So they may have always worried about the future, but during the pandemic, that worry came forward. So like, what if our parents pass away? Or in the case of siblings like me and Laura, what if we pass away from COVID? Who's going to then take care of our brothers and sisters? So there's a lot of stress, and then, guilt, having to watch our brothers and sisters suffer more than many others during the pandemic. And at that second point where we studied siblings again, at that second point, we found a lot that was very similar, with the exception of a new added emotion, which was sadness. So a lot of siblings felt really sad for what their brothers and sisters were losing. So we are going to do a third point research on this as well, because the pandemic has certainly lasted longer than 6 months, and we want to know how people are doing now. So we'll be doing that third check-in.
The Ontario Caregiver Organization is dedicated to equipping caregivers with the resources they need to make sure they are not alone in their journey. Through our e-learning courses, you can learn on your own time and at your own pace. We provide e-learning courses for family caregivers, healthcare providers, volunteers, and employers. If you're new to caregiving, you can take a Caregiver 101 course to get you started. For more information, visit learning.ontariocaregiver.ca. That's learning.ontariocaregiver.ca. Now, back to our episode. Welcome back to the Time to Talk podcast. We are now joined with Laura Nicholls, who we're eager to bring into the conversation. Laura is a sibling caregiver, as we mentioned, and she is also part of the Sibling Collaborative. Laura, thanks so much. I know you've been listening to Helen chat, and I'm sure you have lots to share in terms of your story as well. So could you tell us a little bit about your experience as a sibling caregiver?
Well, hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
I think the first thing I would say is everything that Helen said, what she said. That's the first thing, what she said. My experience as a caregiver is slightly different. My brother and I, we are of African Canadian descent. And so my brother walks through the world as a disabled Black man. That makes a difference. And the world is not kind to the disabled. And my brother's a big Black man, and so, and he does not look developmentally disabled. So he, what the cliche is. And so we've had experiences. And so my concern for my brother is not just as a disabled man, but it is also as a man of color. I've been very lucky because we've had support from from our agency, the Durham Association for Family Respite Services. We had a wonderful support worker up until very recently, when he suddenly passed away. And he stayed with us during the whole pandemic, at which a lot of people did not have that experience. So we were lucky with that. To speak personally, as my experience as a caregiver, it can be a lonely life. It can be a very lonely life. I am a city girl. And I'm a city mouse. My brother's a country mouse. So I've moved to a very small town, and it's been hard. And because your life suddenly becomes about about your sibling, and it's hard to find. I'm still trying to find where Laura fits in to this picture. And that's a hard thing to do, because you don't always have time, because there's always something. And one of the things that when you become, my experience was different again, because my mother was older. I always knew that I was going to be the caregiver of my brother. I always knew. My mother was older. She was suffering from dementia. I'd been a caregiver for years before my mother passed, but it was still a shock. Mm-hmm. And it sounds strange because she was 87 years old. She was suffering from dementia, but it was still a shock, even though I knew that this was coming. The reality is way different than the anticipation. And there's no manual. There's no manual because, trust me, I looked online. There's no manual on how to be a sibling caregiver. The system is set up for parents. It's not set up for siblings. And so when you go to, as Helen did, when you go to these agencies and you say, well, I'm the sibling, it's sort of like, well, yeah, do what your mother did, or sorry, we can't help you. You don't fit into our criteria. So there's not a lot of space for us. And as the population gets older, as things change, more and more siblings. I would also just want to slip in, it's usually the female. It's a very gender, we rarely have, even in our meetings and things like that, there's rarely men there. Mm-hmm. And usually when there's a man there, he we practically have a ticker tape parade for it because it's so unusual. But so it's very gender based. It's usually females, usually the women, the sisters who end up being the caregivers, and that's sort of accepted. I'm the older sister, so it was my job. From the very beginning, from all my life, I knew it was going to be me.
There's a whole nother episode there to unpack in terms of all of that, I'm sure.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, that's the thing. It's not just your brother or your sister moves in with you or you move in with them. And there's so many levels. And I've spent a lot of the time since my mom passed finding levels. And just when you think you've got it, boom, there's something else that you never anticipated. Hmm. And again, there's no guidebook.
Well, we're hoping we can at least give a conversation that people can relate to for our listeners today. Helen, did you have something you wanted to add there?
I just wanted to jump in. I always feel a lump in my throat when I hear Laura talk. When Laura says that it's a lonely life, I just really wanted to reiterate it is a very lonely journey. Siblings don't connect with each other. And when you find somebody we have this experience whenever the Sibling Collaborative has a meeting or a meetup or some kind of event where brothers and sisters get in the room for the first time together, there's almost like this instantaneous bonding because we so get it. But then that might be just about being a brother or sister, but where Laura and I are, where we are actually caring, it is a lonely life. And Laura also said something about, where does Laura fit in? And I so understand that. It's hard to carve out space for yourself in this journey. And yeah.
And I'm sure many people, and I mean, hence the need for the Sibling Collaborative, because I'm sure there's a lot of other people that have come to you and said, I need someone I can talk to that can relate to this, because, every sort of different category of caregiving is its own niche thing. There's sort of the broader umbrella, but everybody's sort of individual experience is different. And it really helps to have someone that you can relate to and that can relate to the fact that it is often a lonely journey. I'm sure it's quite meaningful for everyone that's involved to have, this group to connect with. We've talked about COVID-19 a little bit, Laura. How has that changed your caregiving journey?
Well, as I said, we were fortunate because we had a support worker, and there were so many stories of people who their siblings, their day programs were done. Their support workers just said, "See you later." We had ours, but there was fear. The fear you felt about when they said that that people couldn't go in with the person who was sick. My brother wouldn't have understood what was going on. And so the idea of him being in a situation where he's all by himself, he's surrounded by people he doesn't know, he's going through something, that literally kept me up at night. And you know, it was terrifying. It was so frightening. And I don't think that people, one of the things that about the COVID experience, that people talked about a lot of different groups, but they rarely talked about the disabled. They rarely talked about the needs of the disabled. And I used to always say, hey, what about us? You know, like, you know, and I felt that we were marginalized, that we were ignored, that the families of caregivers of disabled people and disabled people themselves were not considered. It's not anything new, but you know, it was a pandemic, and it would have been nice if, you know, the decision makers had even considered us as part of the mosaic.
Absolutely. I think there's many segments of the population that come to mind, including the disabled, where community, daily routines, whatever sort of physical or emotional or mental support you're used to are so key in the day-to-day life. And then you suddenly remove all of those things. And it's mind-boggling. It's just so hard to, you know, the blanket decisions were put in place for a reason when it comes to COVID-19, but there are some people that they affected a lot more than others. And we know this. It was, you know, we were not all in the same boat. We weren't really. Not everybody was in the same boat. And there's a lot of learning happening as this goes along. So it's important to talk about this. Do you have a piece of advice, Laura, for someone who is just, I mean, it's a tough one, because I think, you know, it changes constantly. As you said, just when you think you know something, it changes. But do you have any sort of advice?
Yes, I do.
Who is just starting their sibling caregiving experience? And what would you like to share about that?
Well, research before, do work before you're in that situation. Have the conversation with your parents, with, you know, what happens when you're dead. Nobody wants to have that conversation, you know, but you have to. You have to know where things are as far as finances go, as far as legal issues go, where things are. You have to have all of that information before you're thrown in, because one of the things that parents and that governments, and they don't realize that you're mourning your parent as you're stepping into this new role. And I say to parents that the sibling who is taking over that caregiver role, they're your child too. And you have to think about them and what's happening to their life. I had to grieve over my mother, find out how to bury my mother, and also think about, well, now I've got to move, you know, 100 kilometers. That's a hard thing to deal with. So have the conversation first. Think about what is going to be in place. And because as I said, you're not going to have time when you're in that, and find support. Just go out and find, you know, the people who will help you. And there are people out there, the organizations, and join up with the Sibling Collaborative. Let me just put an ad in there, because the first time I was in a room with a bunch of siblings was one of the most moving experiences of my life. I'd never been in that position before. I'd never been in a room of siblings, and I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to, you know, say, when this is my story. We knew each other's stories. We knew each other's histories and the guilt and the shame and the complexity of what it's like to be a sibling of a developmentally disabled person, a disabled person. We knew that, and it was a connection. Again, it's one of the most amazing afternoons of my life because it meant so much to me. So I would say find people to help you, because you won't be able to do it by yourself. No matter how much you think you can do, you need help, and get it. There's no shame in it.
Well, absolutely not. And I'm glad you included that piece. Not only you were talking about how to learn how to care for the sibling that needs care, but you need, as the sibling caregiver, to learn how to care for yourself, right, on top of that, and ask for help when you need it. Helen, do you have anything to add to that?
Man, how can you top that, Laura? Laura just said it all so beautifully, and I really concur with everything she said. I mean, I think as a sibling of a person with a developmental disability, you grow up just minding out for yourself. Like your parents are so busy just trying to figure out schools and doctors and this, then you're just left to your own devices. And so we carry that through also to when we are ultimately caring for our brother or sister, and that is not a positive end result. And I've really suffered trying to do that, and I'm trying not to do that anymore, but it's really hard because actually there's not a lot of places to turn. So Laura's connected to a great organization, and I'm really lucky because I'm connected to a fantastic organization as well, where my brother is. We're connected to Live, Work, Play in Ottawa. And so I think that's unique about me and Laura, and we're both very, very lucky that way, that we are connected to great organizations, because I don't think a lot of people with disabilities are necessarily connected to organizations. That organization may not be great, and they may not welcome you as a brother or sister supporting a person with a disability. So that's why I keep bringing up organizations, and you need to do a good job for the brothers and sisters of the person you're supporting. But other advice, I mean, I try to take very, very good care of my mental health. I'm not always successful, but regular counseling for years. Since my mom died, I'm also part of the acceptance and commitment therapy training team at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. So any opportunities that come about that's free for caregivers, try to engage in that. And then my own care, I was going to say like a spiritual path. Like I like to read different kinds of things like Pema Chodron. It gives me hope and focus. I don't know what more to say about that. And I just think I every day wake up and I'm grateful that I'm still married. That's I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to stay married. So I'm still married, which is a huge achievement through all of this. And that I still have my head screwed on straight and we can march forward. But I don't have any advice that would top what Laura had to say.
Can I just say one thing? Mm-hmm. Helen Ries is a hero. And the kind of work that she does for we siblings, or us siblings, I don't know what the proper grammar is amazing. And she works hard. And I'm proud to call her my friend. I'm proud to say that I know her, and I'm grateful to her for what she's done. Aww. And for what she's doing. So I had to say that.
Oh, thanks. That's
Well,
so sweet.
Given that, and given both of your stories and what you shared today, and I wanted our listeners to know more about the Sibling Collaborative. So where can they go to find out more?
Well, for now, our website, sibcollab.ca. And like I said earlier, we have this super exciting transition happening. We're actually going to be changing our name to Siblings Canada as well. So I think getting connected on our website and to our newsletter is the best way. So of course we have social media, Twitter and Facebook, but I hate social media, and we're trying to use less of it and focus more on our newsletter. So I think that's really the way that people can best be connected to the work that we're doing. And then ultimately, you'll be able to find us on the Center for Canadian Center for Caregiving Excellence website. We're going to have an adult siblings page, and we'll be having lots of information on that page and resources on that page.
Well, Helen and Laura, I thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with us and for sharing both of your stories and the generosity in doing so. I know that you probably are both speaking directly to a large segment of the population that maybe feels that no one is talking to them or there for them. So I think it's really important that you did share with us today. So thank you for that.
And I wanted to say thank you to the Ontario Caregiving Organization for actually paying attention to sibling caregiving. OCO has, since I first connected with them, been amazing around recognizing the sibling caregiving role. So thanks to them for giving Laura and I the space to talk to you today.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can access more details about support services on our website, ontariocaregiver.ca. Until next time, I'm Michelle Jobin, and you have been listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. We hope you have a wonderful day.